Comic Muggles podcast. I am your host, Marilyn, and my beautiful co-host, Latricia, is not here with us today. She is taking care of herself and taking a step back for a little bit, but she will rejoin us in later episodes, and she gives her positive energy and blessings for us today. My guest today is an amazing, powerful woman, Nicole Ward. She has been a special education teacher for 17 years with special interest in neurodivergent students. She has been a special ed consultant for families navigating through their IEPs for children for 12 years at the Moore Autism Clinic. She's also a domestic violence survivor, and her story is very unique and very telling in the ways that domestic violence doesn't always start at the beginning or even the middle of relationships, and many victims of abuse do not, what's the word I'm looking for, endure this chronic brutality until they are trying to escape their abuser. Her violence lasted 12 years after trying to leave her abuser, and we are here to hear her story today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. So start off from the beginning and tell us how you met your ex-partner.
Sure.
And just kind of go from there.
So I was doing student teaching at Alcott Middle School.
Okay.
And the teacher I taught with had a son who was a teacher's aide at the high school, at Norman High. And he was with some of his students one day, and they came into our classroom, and we just talked to the kids and talked to him a little bit and left. And I told her that my next part of my student teaching was at the high school. Mm-hmm. And she told me, she said, oh, well, there's this guy that her son works with, and she said, I'm telling you now, it's no. She's like, he's super charming, he's a good looking guy. And me being me, that was basically telling me, do it.
Yeah.
Me? Like, I can handle it. Anyway, stored it in the back of my head, and at the time I was dating a very, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Stop. I was dating a very, very good man that played football for OU. He played in the NFL. He's now a geriatric doctor in California, and I broke up with him for my ex-husband. Because, and I know for a fact it was because I was warned about him. And in my mind, I ended up going up there teaching. I immediately knew who he was. He played what I thought was hard to get, but now I know it's his narcissistic personality. He didn't care that I was giving him attention. He was with another woman at the time.
Oh, wow.
And it wasn't until I started to back away that he started reeling me in, type thing, and he ended up breaking up with that girl, and we started dating. In my mind, we were dating, but looking back, I was like, I remember I was moving into my very first house, and I needed him to help me move. And he didn't help. He had friends with his brothers. He doesn't have blood brothers. Cooter Bear, stop. He has his close friends, but it was his brother, and I didn't know that at the time, so I'm like, oh, he's with his brother. And he didn't help move or anything, and I think I was more into the relationship than he was. My roommate at the time, one of these things that I'll feel guilty about forever was I basically blew her off for him. She didn't like him. She knew right away. She picked up on the signal. Just the way he would respond to me or not respond to me, silent treatment type stuff. And we ended up having a falling out. Basically, she just got so annoyed that she moved out. And, but I was so focused on him that I don't want to say I didn't care. I cared, but I just cared about whatever we were doing more. So one of my ways to try to keep him around because I had convinced myself that he just needed to be cultured. That was the problem. He wasn't around people with open minds and stuff.
Right.
He was raised in a very strict Baptist household, you know, and I'm like, even though there's those Baptists that say they're very religious, but their behavior says all otherwise, you know, which I found out along the way. Well, anyway, after a few months, he'd never flown before, and so I took him to Miami. And we talked about getting engaged. And so on New Year's Eve, later that year, we'd been together about 9 months, we got engaged in Austin. I remember when I would tell people that we got engaged, their reactions were not happy for me, or it was more like a concern. You know, they would try to be happy for me, but they were more kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Type thing, you know. But when you're in that mind, there was nothing that was going to convince me otherwise. You know, I was just so. So we
married.
Yeah, we got engaged, and you know, my family were happy because they only knew what I told them. You know, and there was some red flags along the way that I was noticing, but I was just choosing to not pay attention to. And one of the things that I see is how controlling he was now, looking back, was I have a half brother who is on the spectrum, and as children, he has some intellectual disability as well, but he's autistic. As children, he used me as one time as kind of a sexual, what's the word I'm looking for?
Curious play?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it had an effect on me, you know, but that was something that my mom knew about, and like in counseling, I had come to terms with the idea that his intention during that time was not what most abusers' intention was, but nonetheless it had an effect on me.
Right.
So I could balance that, and I was able to work through that, and I mean, he's a blood relative to me, and I worry about him, and, you know, I love him.
Right.
It was just an odd setup, and, you know, but it did have an effect.
Sure.
So my ex-husband could not understand that, and was like, no, he's not coming to our wedding. And having to tell my dad, you know, and it was that, he's like, we're not gonna get married at the wedding. And so me having to swallow that and tell my dad, 'cause my dad didn't know. And so my dad's finding out right before I get married that this happened, and that, you know, and my dad was pissed.
How old were you?
When I got married,
when that happened?
I was 6.
Okay.
And developmentally, he was about 7 or 8, but
Sure.
in years, he was a 12-year-old, you know, and my dad was pissed at,
Right.
you know, just at my half-brother, but, you know, my brother happens to be a psychologist, and he wasn't acting in a psychologist way, you know, but he was mediating kind of this interaction with my dad and I. And I had to tell my dad that because of this, he wasn't invited to the wedding. And it just killed me, you know, because I have a half-sister as well who lives in LA, and it's kind of one of those things, well, if he's not coming, then I'm not coming. And so she didn't come, and like her parents, when they divorced, like her mom and stepdad were always good to my brother and me, even though, you know, my dad cheated on my mom, or cheated on their mother with my mother. But they were always good to us, you know, and so the family meshed, you know, and it had its own dynamic, but it wasn't a dysfunctional thing in those terms. You know, everything worked the way it should. They got along. It was kind of a nice, but my ex-husband just could not. And that was like the biggest, like, you know, we're weeks away from the wedding, and that was my first thinking of, wait a minute, what am I doing? But by then my ego was in it. and I just could not. And my mom had told me along the way, at any point, I don't care how much money your dad and I have spent, my parents are not together, but they get along, they co-parent. I don't care how much money we've spent, you say the words and it's done. We'll go on vacation or whatever, you know. And I'm like, okay, but I couldn't do it. And so I remember the day of the wedding, my dad walked me down the aisle and I'm telling myself, say it, just say it, you know, he'll take care of it, you know, but couldn't do it. And I don't remember any of the wedding. I remember bits and pieces from the, what's the party afterwards?
The reception.
The reception. I wasn't drinking or anything, so that's not why I didn't remember.
Right.
It's just, I mean, it's just flashes that I see, really, of like the good parts of it. My grandfather, who was able to make it, some of my students that were there, and things like that, but I couldn't do it. And so we got married, and I wouldn't say, I mean, we got along enough, and I didn't know what a good relationship. My parents divorced when I was 13 because my dad can't be faithful. So I didn't know what I thought it was what I was seeing on TV, because social media was new at the time.
Sure.
That's what I'm thinking it's supposed to be. And so it's going along fine enough, but about 4 months in, I remember I started slipping into depression. And I remember he was out with his friends, and I texted him and I said, I need you to come home, because I was having suicidal thoughts. So we were about 4 months into the relationship. I knew I was going into a depression, and he was out with his friends, and I called him home, and I told him, you know, I asked him to come home, and he didn't want to. Kuda bear. He didn't want to, but you know, I told him I was having suicidal thoughts and I needed him to come home, and that was kind of his first betrayal to me, is that he told all his friends that that's why he needed to leave, and just saying, you know, I need to get home to my wife or whatever, you know, we got something going on. He told them, you know, she's threatening suicide or whatever. So he's starting to work on his crazy of me, you know, presenting me as this
Did you
crazy
say you
person.
were pregnant?
No, not yet.
Okay, not yet. Okay.
But I had also told him that I wanted a divorce. And he said, you know, he was like, what, you know, we've only been married 4 months. And so I kind of, he came home the night, we had kind of a talk, nothing was really resolved. I didn't feel better about anything, you know, but just kind of let it go, and just didn't, one of those things, we never talked about it again.
Right.
And we kind of got along and stuff. I never really liked his family. They didn't like me much because I didn't want to go to their church, and that was like a big thing. But we stayed together. I think we were about. He has a daughter from a previous relationship. Okay. And she came pretty much every other weekend, except like if she was sick, she wouldn't come because he doesn't know how to parent when somebody's sick. Right. Like he would take any excuse for her to not come. And when she did come, I was the parent. Right. He was gone to the gym or, you know, doing whatever he wanted to do. And so I was left to parent. I started to resent that. I mean, she is, and I'll never say different. She was the best behaved, the sweetest. I mean, that's one of those guilt things in me, you know, because, I mean, she and I spent a lot of time together. I babysat my niece and nephew one summer, and she was with us every other week, so she did all the things with us. It was good, you know, but he wasn't the one there parenting. Right. Could have better quit. And that he was always just, you know, if he needed to get on to her, he'd get on to her, but she never did anything worth getting on to, you know, but I started to resent the, him not being around and not, you know, it was always me, you know, I had to prepare my weekends when she came, when it's like, you know, not the parent here.
Right.
You are, you know. Yeah, the kid, she's cool, and I like having her around, but you know, I'm inconvenienced, not you. And
how was your relationship with her mother?
we got along fine.
Okay.
You know, it was, he owed her thousands of back child support. I paid it off with my inheritance I got from my grandfather.
Wow.
For him. So she and I didn't have any problems.
Wow.
You know, when Christmas came, I'd coordinate the birthdays together so that she could have one birthday party instead of having the two, you know, or whatever, because that's what she wanted. You know,
Right.
I'd always ask her, what do you want to do? You know, Mom and I, you know, Mom kept me abreast of school things and stuff like that. So, we got along fine. I remember one time though, there at the end when I was pregnant, I had been pregnant, I was probably 5 or 6 months pregnant at the time. I was miserable.
How early in the relationship was this? When did you get pregnant?
Oh, so a year and a half.
Okay.
Well, year and 3 months about. Pregnant. So I'm about 6 months pregnant. I'm depressed. I know I don't want to be in the relationship anymore. I did you know, maybe the relationship will get better if we get married. Maybe the relationship will be better if I buy us a house. If I buy us a house, because he wasn't working. That's the other part of this. He wasn't working this whole time we were married.
Wow.
He was supposed to go to school. Then he didn't. And then he was going to be an MMA fighter, and then he was going to be a firefighter, and then he was going to be a policeman, and then you know, it's just
right.
Then the military, but couldn't pass the ASVAB.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like he's the only person I know in the world that can't pass the ASVAB because it's. But anyway, so I just kept. Finally, I'm like, okay, nothing's going to make it get better. You know, having a child's not going to make it get better. You know. That's definitely not going to make it get better. So that's when I'm like, okay, I've got to go. But I was so depressed. I remember laying in bed one day, and my stepdaughter came to me, and she was sad. She's very empathetic. Her guinea pig had died, or hamster, or something at her mom's house had died. But she was reading a book, and it had one of these things in there, and it made her sad. She came to me with tears in her eyes, and I remember. I did not have the feelings, the energy, the anything to give her what she needed in that moment.
Sure.
And I just didn't. And I remember seeing it on her face and just, you know, I felt terrible about it. Like I didn't have anything to give her to comfort her through that. And, you know, what I'm crying about now is that years and years and years and years later, I'm talking 15 years later, she accused me of being emotionally abusive because of that moment. You know, when it was, to me, it was like, what? Like, first of all, I wasn't one of your parents that was responsible for your emotional well-being at that time.
Right.
As an adult, I did have some ownership in what you needed, and I just didn't have it to give you that one time.
Yeah.
And so, but back then, this was happening, I didn't know that that's, and I can't take away how that made her feel either, but anyway, he invited his nieces over as well for me to watch with the daughter, and while he'd leave and do whatever, and
while you're pregnant.
Yeah. And, you know, don't forget, not to mention the time I had to mow the front yard when the lawnmower only had 3 wheels because his ass wouldn't get out there and do it. Pregnant, you know, it just stuff like that, you know, that wasn't like he was helping me keep the house up or anything like that.
Every bit of responsibility.
Every bit. And, so finally I talked to my mom and I told her, and she said, sis, you gotta do it now, you know. You can't, if you're this miserable, you can't bring your baby into that situation. And so we were going on a family vacation, and of course we paid for him and his daughter to go with us.
Right.
And I said, but they were leaving 2 days before us and coming back 2 days because of an exchange for her to go back to her mom's. So we just set it up to where I said, look, we're going to Mexico, and when I get back, I want you to be gone. I said, I want a divorce. I'm done. And a few days prior to that, he had pushed me. And that was the only physical act he ever came at me with. You know, there were a lot of brain games and that, what do they call it? Food salad.
Word salad.
Psychological I mean,
abuse.
just, I was exhausted too by this point, you know. I mean, I've left out a lot of that stuff, but that all was happening. And the more he started to realize, the more done I was, the worse it got, you know. And just, it was so weird how he was able to mess with me, because he's not an intelligent person, and that's what messed with me the most.
Many of them aren't, and I think that's something I realized after leaving. It's like once you start becoming aware of what's happening, and then you're able to just be the observer. Like I would be sitting on the couch, like just listening to him talk, and I'm like, he's not saying anything.
No,
I've been listening to this shit for 12 years.
And
what the fuck are you talking about, bro?
And the way my ex is he repeats things he hears, like verbatim.
Yes. Well, that's called mirroring.
Oh.
Excuse me. So something that particularly narcissistic abusers do, it's called mirroring. So any act or display of behavior that they see in someone else, especially if it's their victim per se, that they're trying to manipulate. So say if you start meditating or doing yoga or reading books, oh, now they order the book on Amazon. Oh, their whole life is changing because they're meditating now, even though they're not doing shit, right? But they will tell you these things, and sometimes they might display those actions for a very short period of time when they're trying to reel you back in. But it's a mirroring, and that often even happens in the love bombing phases, like in the very beginning. What's your favorite color? My favorite color is blue too. You know, it's very, they want to be your everything. They want to be everything you guys have in common is the same. And so it's really just a act of, that further perpetuates the psychological abuse, you know. So. It was,
when I got to that point to where I was starting to kind of come through that cloud, you know, it really confused me. You know, it was like I that's when I realized I had totally lost myself. One thing that happened repeatedly throughout the relationship was that he lied. I mean, pathological liar, one that lies for no reason. You know, and I was catching him in these lies, and he would try to bring me into some of those lies, you know, I'm standing next to him while he's telling somebody something, and he's telling it as though we both experienced this lie. And it's, you don't know what to do in that situation, you know. One, because I wasn't me to where I could have stood up and said, be like, whoa, dude, you're what? I had been so broken down by that point that I just didn't know what to do. You know, it was really weird.
Especially if you're just caught off guard like that. And that's what I think they do a lot of times is they put you in these really uncomfortable situations. And it's almost like and then depending on your answer, like that's a form of retaliation. You know, like if you're going to comply and be in compliance. And I think that's what furthers their grandiose sense of self when they're around people, coworkers, whatever. Because if you don't play the game, what is going to happen? What's going to happen when you leave? What's going to happen when y'all get in the car? You know what I mean? So you got to be the good girl. You know.
And he was one of those people that can ruin any good moment. And would. You know, holidays, birthdays, every single one. It was miserable. So finally I said, you know, when we get back from Mexico, I should be gone. We got back, he was gone. I was 7 months pregnant at the time, and you know, that's immediately when it got very intense with the games he was playing with me. The following Monday, I filed for divorce, was going to meet with my attorney, and he cut off my cell phone. And, which to me was like, this is the mother of your child. This is like a very stressful time, that this person's pregnant with your child, that this, like, what are you doing, and so it was like, okay, I wouldn't have ever done that to you, ever.
Of course.
And so that's the first one. And then he gets his attorney and he lets me know he's filing for custody, right out of the womb. I've never had a child before, it's like, so the amount of stress that I was under while I was pregnant with my child was, I can't even describe it, and I feel like that has something to do with the anxiety that she carries today.
For sure.
I feel like she was born anxious, and I feel like that's my fault, because I was so stressed out during this time, and I had great support. My mom ended up moving in with me, because now I'm in this big house that I bought for us, and he's gone, but she moved in with me, thank God. She was the other parent when I first had my child, but
I just want to interject and let you know, though, that generational cycles are hard, and the things that you endured, like witnessing divorce and things like that, like heavily impacted your nervous system.
Yes.
And it's not your fault.
And I know.
And you didn't know any better, and
Right.
you did the best that you could with the information that you had
Right.
at that time, and that's all we can do. And I can't take that feeling of guilt away, because I resonate with that so heavily, and I think this is where, really letting people understand like how attachment styles and things like that work, because 60% of infants will end up having the same attachment style as their mothers, and so what you did by leaving, though, you immediately started to change the course of her cycle, you know what I mean?
Right, and I was aware that I've had, the reason I get disability from the military is because I was raped. I don't know any female, I do not know a single female in the military. I don't know about these people that I work with now, but before, when I was in the military, I didn't know a single female that had not married, experienced some kind of sexual assault.
Right.
And then I was raped by an officer.
So let's backtrack a little bit then, real quick. We'll pause where you were at in your story. How long were you in the military?
So I graduated high school in '97. I went to OU in the fall of '97. Got like a 0.75 first semester, 0.0 second semester. I was just there to party, and my mom told me, hey, the agreement is we'll support you as long as you're going to college, but you're not. So she was the principal of my former high school, and they had just flown her out to San Diego to one of those Marine Corps, basically a PR thing. She was like, you ever thought about joining the military? And I was like, no.
Yeah.
Well, 30 days later, I was at boot camp.
Wow.
So the impulsivity in me, make a decision, and I'm going. And so I joined it was September of '98, and I got out in June of 2002.
Okay.
Aside from that experience, it was great. It was a good, I grew up. I was getting paid every 2 weeks. I lived in Hawaii. I was single. All my friends were single. It was cool.
What were you doing in the military? What was your
Basically administrative stuff.
Okay, yeah.
I worked at a headquarters. It was a cake military job. And there was just this one person that ruined it, so I'd had some trauma already,
Sure.
by the time I got, and it was one of those things. I remember when I decided, I'm leaving this relationship for my child, it's because I already knew was bringing some baggage anyway.
Right.
And that's, it's kind of weird when are pregnant, it starts dawning on you that you're going to be totally responsible for somebody else's life for a long time.
Right.
And every decision you make has some, you know, that's really a big understanding to take on. And people that don't experience pregnancy don't get that.
Understand, yes.
And so,
so whenever you went through that with the officer, what came of that?
in true military style, they tried to brush it under the rug. When I joined the military, they asked about drug use, and I had told my recruiter the truth, which was I did all kinds of stuff, you know, I was a party person, you know, and so she said, well, we'll say that you smoked marijuana one time, you know, and I said, whatever, I don't know,
Yeah.
you know, you don't think
Wow.
you don't know what the UCMJ and court martial and all that stuff is before you join, so I'm like, whatever, you know, you're the one that knows what to do, and I said, whatever, you know. Well, I had to get a security clearance because I was at a headquarters, and this was when I got in, it was before 9/11, and there was a huge years-long backlog.
Okay.
So my security clearance never kept not coming through, so I just had an interim secret clearance. Well, shortly after this happened, and as they're trying to brush it under the rug, when I first got there, the general that I worked for, the one-star general that I worked for, was a male, and he really liked me. I was friends with his daughter. He was good to me.
Mm-hmm.
He came in. I had to have him as help later because I realized that they're going to brush this under the rug because I had begged not to work with him. I said, please, as people were willing to trade me shifts. My supervisor was just totally against it.
So had that already happened before you were asking to switch shifts?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you had already tried to be preventative even before that even happened?
Yes, I had gone to my senior NCO and told him, like, dude, this dude creeps me out. You know, this is the stuff he says to me. It's weird. Oh, no. This is what he said to me. You can't be in the military and look like you look and not expect to get that kind of attention. That was my response.
Wow.
Yeah. So as this is going on, September 11th happened. It was right after September 11th happened that the rape happened in the security ballroom at work, 6 o'clock in the morning, because no one was there yet. Mm. And so I had told my supervisor, not the one that had just told me that, I knew I couldn't tell him what happened. You know, he had just told me that it's my fault in the first place. Right. You know, so the security stuff comes through because they just start pushing clearances through, and they decide they're going to charge me with fraudulent enlistment because my security interview did not match my enlistment paperwork. And so that's when I was like, okay, if we're going to go down that road, then this is what happened to me here. And I told him on such and such a date, I had the wherewithal, and I told him to have it marked it on my calendar. Yeah. I said I told him on such and such date, I asked to trade shifts, you know, it didn't happen, and I got in touch with my former one-star, and he kind of got in the middle, was like, what, time out, you know. And so finally they just said, okay, we're gonna let you out, just be done with it, you know, don't pursue this, we won't pursue that, just get out. And so, and so they did, they just let me out. It was kind of.
So he was never held accountable?
Never.
So they just gave you.
In fact, he got
discharge?
He ended up getting promoted. He retired as a colonel. They gave me an honorable discharge. I get disability because of it now. Like, I mean, I guess if there's a
silver lining,
I guess.
Yeah,
you know,
but it's like, hey, here's a bunch of money
to
compensate for.
Yeah, but it can never compare to the hell I've been through since.
Absolutely.
And what now my child goes through just subsequently, you know. So it's just, so I had that, and
wow.
And not much of a surprise later, I realized it was a self-worth thing, you know, that I ended up with my ex-husband. I didn't have much self-worth, you know.
Sure. You were violated and mistreated and taken advantage of, and then not believed on top of that.
Right.
And so that makes, you know, I always say this, I think with any episode we do interviews with, is that, you know,
Millie.
abusers are predators.
Mm-hmm.
They know exactly what to look for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's never, ever the victim's fault. You don't attract an abuser.
Mm-hmm.
They weaponize your vulnerabilities.
Yes.
And so,
yeah,
it's not your fault.
I know. And so, Millie, stop. So moving back to being 7 months pregnant, filed for divorce. My ex-husband tells me he's going to file for sole custody straight out the womb, which freaks me out. But my attorney's like, that won't happen, you know. And my attorney had met with they'd spoken to his attorney at one time, and my attorney told me.
So you got an attorney with no job?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no job. He got an attorney. Luckily, it was some family friend who was,
of course,
put about as much into it as they were paying him, which I think was probably nothing. Sure. Because his attorney told my attorney, like, he's never going to be the dad that you think he is, you know. Yeah, he wants to go for full custody, but that's not something we're going to fight on, you know. Basically, just split marital assets. And I'm like, look, take what you want. You just leave me alone.
Right.
You know, I mean, he fought me down to some resell baby clothes that his mother had bought already and given to me that he wanted back. You know, it's like, whatever.
Because anything you buy, anything they buy you, it's not really yours.
Right.
I mean, and that goes for their kids too.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
whether it's clothes, beds, whatever, it is always theirs.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was hell. I ended up having Sophia at the hospital. They induced me because my blood pressure was too high. I was at the hospital several hours. I let him know that I was in labor. I was good, but the second I found out he was there, my blood pressure shot through the roof. They had to kick everyone out of the room, you know, slap oxygen on me, you know. Nobody could come in for a couple hours because they had to get my heart rate back down and everything. And apparently he was out there saying stupid stuff to my family in the waiting room and stuff. Of course, the nurses were not letting any of that get back to me or anything.
Sure.
I had great nurses. And they said, what are we going to do when you deliver? He does not have to be in here. He does not have to cut the cord. He doesn't have to, he never has to come in, you know. Sure. I felt guilty.
Of course.
I said, he can come in and cut the cord after I delivered. And he did. He came in, and there's a picture of him at the bed, you know.
Yeah.
Sappy looking, like Sophie says that he looks creepy.
Sure.
But, you know, and I'm just looking down at Sophie on me, and
I think it's hard when you look back at pictures, and again, when you're in awareness and you don't, because I'm a huge picture taker. Like, I have like 4,000 pictures, you know. I mean, it's just like, I love taking pictures, and I'm always wanting to capture these cute moments, like, and what I would think would be cute would be, he's fucking playing his video game, and the baby's laying next to him.
Right.
And I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
Right.
Not being a parent.
Right. Exactly.
You know, and then when you look back at these pictures, and he looks so disgusted in every picture. He's not smiling in any picture.
Yep.
Anytime he's holding his son, like, there's never any joy or anything. It's just like, you know, and in my mind, I'm like, look at your daddy. And, you know, because you're wanting to project your own goodness and all of that onto that person.
Yes.
And I think too, whenever you're so empathic and highly sensitive too, like, you truly see that person for as a human being.
Yes.
You know, and for me, that's what I saw. this human who had been also hurt and obviously experienced trauma, and so I made excuses for his behavior because I'm like, oh, I could heal him.
That's right.
I'm the fixer.
Exactly.
I'm the martyr. I'm the rescuer.
Exactly.
Even though I wasn't doing shit to fix myself.
Exactly.
You know, but I thought that if I could just help heal him,
yes,
then I'll be okay.
Yes.
I'll be better once he's better.
Exactly.
You know, and you put yourself on the back burner and you become self-sacrificing. You become that sacrificial lamb.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And taking everything
Yes.
at their expense.
That's exactly what it was.
Yep.
And I mean, that's exactly how I ended up with him, because that woman said, don't, you know, but all of those things you just, that was me, you know. So I have my daughter, I think it was, I can't remember what the infant custody agreement is, but it's something like after 2 weeks, the other parent can take the baby for up to 2 hours and one time a week. Or every other week, one time every other week, which scared the shit out of me.
Sure.
So, mind you, I filed for divorce since 7 months pregnant. Now it's 2 weeks after giving birth. He comes to pick her up for the first time with a woman that he's now living with.
Sounds about right. Sounds about right.
Right. So I meet this woman for the first time as my 2-week-old daughter is leaving with my ex-husband and her 2 babies, a 1 and a 2-year-old.
No, our woman already has children.
Yes. Yes.
You got it.
And I become later, they don't last but 10 months. She's smarter than me. She gets done with him sooner, sends him on his way. She and I become friends.
Now, did you, at this time, during your court litigation stuff, were you honest with your attorney about who he was?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was. And, I mean, I documented I still have the document. I mean, I have documentation like this.
Yes.
Binders and binders of stuff. And
are you neurodivergent as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a neurodivergent trait,
Yes.
so you can thank us later. And
Yes.
you know, we like unnecessarily keep everything like and you don't even realize it. You really don't.
No.
And then you're like, I got all of this?
Yes. Yes.
That's great.
And I could flip back.
Yeah.
No, that's not what happened.
Yeah.
And so, I'm keeping, and so when he comes to get her, like the other girl and I didn't have any beef with that girl.
Sure.
She didn't try to have any beef with me. You know, it was just kind of like, whatever. You know, I'm crying because I'm having to hand my daughter over, and it's only 2 hours. You know, but thank God she's going with a mom.
Sure.
You don't know how many times my child came home starving, and he'd hand me the thing back of breast milk that she'd only drank this much in 2, 6, 8 hours. You know, as time progressed. I mean. Oh, it was just awful. And so I didn't hate that he always had a woman around, because at least I knew somebody was watching my child, because I knew it wasn't him. I knew it wasn't. It was either his mom, his sister, or the woman he was with at the time. They broke up. We became friends-ish, you know. She had a pill problem. I went with her a couple times to Narcotics Anonymous, and you know, she had married another man at this time who was abusive to her and her boys. She has since died from a fentanyl overdose. So yes, it's sad. Her boys are now in college, and she had a rough life. You know, my daughter. But I liked her.
Yeah.
You know, while they were together, she even tried to be good to me, you know, and she gave me all the information she knew I would want and need while my daughter was with them, and, you know, so she was good to me during that time, which was all the more reason I was open to being friends with her afterwards, you know. He ended up about 5-6 months later ends up with another woman, and I do this because this woman was a 19-year-old high school student. And
how old is he at that time?
31. So they quickly become engaged. They're going to get married. She's bought her dress. They've sent out invitations. They've done all of that.
And you guys are officially divorced.
We're officially divorced. In the meantime, he has decided he's not going to pay child support. He hasn't been. He's not going to pay for anything because why?
Right.
I own half of that. That was his. This was his go-to. I own half of that house, and you haven't bought me out of it. This house
that you haven't paid for.
That's right. Didn't pay a dime.
Sorry, that you didn't have a job.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But my dumbass let his name be on the mortgage. So that was his excuse, that until I refinanced or sold the house, that he didn't have to pay anything. But it wasn't worth my time or money to mess with it. You know, it's like I knew not to engage over something that was only $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 at the time. You know, it just.
And you know, like, so there's two sides of the spectrum whenever it comes to like financial stuff with narcissistic abusers. There's many occasions that when you're dealing with a narcissist, they will, whether it's house, any type of finances, they do not want your name on their shit. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, like in my case, we were still married. He bought a house to try to get me to come back. We were still legally married when he bought that house, you know, and so I had to sign papers. He brought his mom in. You need to get a paper so that way she doesn't have any rights to the house. The lady was like, "Ma'am, like we can't do that." You know what I'm saying? Like we have to have her permission in order to buy. But anything like that. But if it's the opposite, say you got your own business, say you're doing the thing, you know, a close friend of mine, she had a cleaning business, and her partner was very, very persistent about, why is my name not on this? Why is my name not? Why aren't you putting my name on this? And blah, because it's mine. It's not yours, you know, but they will be so persistent in wanting to be involved in anything that's financially with you, any income that you're bringing in. Like I remember I have a recording of him degrading me financially. And mind you, like at this time, he was only making, you know, about $4,000 a month. And then I'm being resourceful, doing side jobs, braiding hair when I can, when my body allows me to. And so like some days, say I make $50 for hair. Right. And he's like, I don't even know what you make. I don't even see what you bring home. And you just can't even give me, you know, slide me $50. And I'm like, so we have a joint account. Right. You make like $4,000 and you want me to slide you the $50 that I made. Millie. That I buy groceries with. So yeah, what you see when you come home is the food in the fridge, the toilet paper you wipe your ass with, the laundry soap that you don't do your own laundry with, you know? Yeah. And it was just so frustrating to just hear that. And I'm like, how fucking selfish. But it's a way for them to financially deplete you in any way, shape, or form. Anything you make, it goes straight to them. Anytime you try to get ahead, if you want to save, no, they will make extravagant purchases so you can't save. Oh, it's so frustrating. Yeah, when we were married, not only did I pay off his back child support, but I also paid off $11,000 of his credit card debt with my inheritance from my grandfather. That sounds so familiar. Yeah. And you know, like I already said, he didn't work the whole time. Never contributed to anything, and you know, but towards the end-ish of our relationship, he started a business that I helped him start, window washing. And actually, when my brother's friends hooked him up with a bunch of accounts, it was a good deal. Yeah. But he ended up deciding he didn't want to work with those Mexicans. He didn't want to. The owner of this place sucked. It's everybody's problem. Yes. Everybody's problem. So he basically loses all these accounts that he could have just given back to my brother's friend, but destroys them instead. Wow. But while he's doing that, I'm saving the tax money because you have to pay taxes quarterly or yearly or whatever it is.
when I filed for divorce, he takes all that money, spends it, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know how his taxes ever turned out, because that was one thing that I
Yeah.
did, you know, my attorney did for me when he
Sure.
divorced. But yeah, talk about, you know, immediately, that was his money. You know, none of it was his, but
Yeah.
whatever, in his mind it was. There was no way he was going to split it with me,
Oh yeah.
you know, but,
I remember whenever I was leaving and we were talking about taxes, and I was like, you know, speaking up and inserting myself, and I was like, you know, next year, because mind you, we were already legally divorced, right? But we had been living together for 3 years, and I was like, I'm going to claim both children next year, and you can claim the older 2 girls. And because I was like, I need that money so I can get ahead.
right.
And he was trying to like persuade me and manipulate me, and he was like, well, don't you think it'd be better for me to just claim everybody? And I'm like, no, because I need to have my own tax return, because I'm going to be buying a house one day, and I need at least 2 years of my own tax returns. And I remember he just laughed, and he was just like, how are you gonna buy a house? You know, and just putting you down. And he's like, well, you ain't gonna get shit, you know. And I'm like, okay, well, that's my problem and not yours, and I will be claiming both children this year, you know. And it's funny because then he tried to go back on that whenever we were in court, and I'm like, I've got receipts that you agreed to this. You know? That's great.
God, exhausting.
So you had your child, you've met the lady,
He
and
was
then
first woman, second woman. But with each woman, he'd become super dad.
Oh yeah.
He, you know, I want all my time. I want, you know, I do such great things. I take them here. I take them here. I. But it's not I. It's them are doing these things with my child. You know, but he's making sure he gets every last minute. You know.
Oh, of course.
Even though he's not there.
Of course.
Yeah. So, and his excuse was always, well, she has a right to build a bond with my family too.
Yeah.
And they make it hard for you to argue that.
Sure.
You know, because it's like, dude, you saying this to me as though I don't want her to have a bond with your family. When you know, nothing I've ever done has indicated that. But you know that's not the case. That's not what I'm complaining about. I'm complaining about you not being there and doing what you're supposed to be doing during this time. My child, when it comes between my child and your girlfriend, between who she should be with, your girlfriend or her mother, I just think it should be the mom.
Obviously, yeah.
You know, call me crazy, which, you know, that's his go-to word. I mean, I'm just crazy. So, on the second wife, girlfriend, and she gets smart and she calls off the wedding 2 weeks before it happens.
So this is the third woman at this time.
This is the second one, the 19-year-old woman, 19-year-old high school woman.
Well, this would be the third, because the one he was with for 10 months. Right. So that was the second one after you.
Oh, after me, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, I'm the first, yeah. So yes, she's the third. She gets smart. I'm so glad, because I mean, she has no idea what she saved herself from.
Right.
You know.
And to be so young.
Yes.
You know, that prefrontal cortex they developed
That's
either,
right.
and it's like, even mine wasn't. And
Yes.
oh my God.
Yes. And I'm like, I don't know who talked sense to her, who got through to her, but thank God they did.
Right.
You know, and I'm like, whew. So he moves back in with his mama. Lives with mama until he starts seeing some woman who is coming. And so at this point, Sophie's 3 or 4 at this time. And so he's got summers every other week. Every other weekend through the school year still. He didn't get any midweek day. It was just every other weekend. And while he's living with mama and there's no woman around, it's hit or miss on visitation. Sometimes no call, no show. Sometimes, I mean, just, you never knew. I mean, I had to have my mom on standby every exchange, because we never knew if he was going to show up. And then when she was with him, we never knew how long he was going to actually keep her. And so one of us needed to go as soon as he called, you know.
Wow.
And that happened repeatedly. Well, I ended up starting to date a man when Sophie's 3. And
So you were single for about 3 years.
yes. And I meet this guy. He's a good guy. He was a recovering addict. He'd had a couple years clean by then. Physician's assistant. Good guy. Smart. Probably the smartest person I've ever dated, honestly. Probably the smartest person, and I don't want to say smart, with a normal to above normal IQ. Everyone else was barely normal.
Right.
And I don't know what that says about me, but
Right.
whatever. Good guy. He was good to Sophie, you know, all of those things. Well, my ex-husband naturally hated it.
Of course.
And the woman he's seeing at the time was older, and I don't know what the dynamic of the relationship was truly, because I'd just seen her and then getting information from my 3 or 4-year-old, whatever she would say, you know,
Right.
because I didn't dig for information. I didn't care.
Right.
So I didn't care to ask, although in his mind, I'm just grilling my child for all this
Sure.
information. And it's like, dude, I don't care.
Right.
You know, but I don't think that their relationship ever got to a serious point or whatever, but he immediately shifts to this other woman who he ends up marrying later. So, because I don't know what the true dynamic of that, I don't know if he was cheated on this one with that one or what, I didn't, you know, whatever.
So basically it was a woman every year.
Yes.
Because think about, we're on woman
Yes.
number 4,
Yes.
and the child is 3, 4?
3. Yeah. Yeah. And and think about his older daughter.
Oh, see, yeah, I forget about his kids.
She was 12 when we divorced. So
Yeah.
during 12, 13, 14, she's seeing dad. I mean, lived with 4 different women in that time, and his mama.
And did you still have contact with her during that time?
We did, yeah, and every Christmas my mom would have an ornament made with Sophie and her sister's names on it and take it over there and stuff. So we tried to maintain this relationship with them, and it was cool. When he got with the 4th woman, that was out right, 4th or 5th, I can't remember which one, the one he ended up marrying, smart woman. We all look alike, by the way. We all look alike. Dark hair, dark eyes, dark skin, you know, it's just different forms of us.
Sure.
I think we're all intelligent women, you know, he has a type, but we all have that vulnerabilities too.
Sure.
Once this stuff starts coming out, we're all like,
Yeah.
But she buys into his story that I'm keeping my child away from him. I'm doing I'm just brainwashing my child to hate him. She buys into all of that.
Yep.
Believes it, and starts what becomes
Abuse by proxy.
yes, and 7 years of legal hell.
Wow.
So we've been in and out of court in this time, but it wasn't anything real contentious. I still had the upper hand on everything, especially when he was no-showing and all that stuff. You know, he took me to court for more. His dumbass took me to court owing me money, asking for more time. So they ended up, what do they call it when they take it straight from your bank account?
Just like withholding?
Yeah.
Or garnishing?
Garnishing.
Okay.
They end up garnishing him and taking away some of his time. Well, he gets with this woman who she's financially competent. She can afford to take me to court. So she does. This woman also worked in the DA's office.
Wow.
She now is the head of a local child abuse facility, forensic child abuse facility.
Wow.
And
And for those that don't know what abuse by proxy is, or the term flying monkeys, flying monkeys is a term that was coined from the movie Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West. Is that right?
I think so.
The West or East? West was, she had these monkeys that would follow her and do her bidding for her. And when we're talking about narcissism, the term flying monkeys is associated with narcissists who have people around them that enable their abusive behavior, and they end up doing their bad deeds for them. So they create this chaos, and they get to sit back and their hands are clean. You know, they use triangulation with other people. So in this case with her, it's very much, my ex is crazy, that's the word they love to use, but they don't have any proof, you know, and it's all just, making up things and insinuating that they're this all-around good dad, they've been taking care of their child, and anything that they can say to further manipulate the news supply. And the women before her obviously had enough awareness that this wasn't true. Now there are occasions where a woman comes along where they will absolutely be very like-minded and believe every bit of it and be so willing to do their dirty work for them.
Yes.
And people that have not experienced abuse by proxy or any of the flying monkeys, if you will, they don't understand that not only are you being abused by your ex, you are also being abused by the people that are surrounded by him, which makes the abuse triple.
Right.
And it's so emotionally, spiritually, and physically taxing.
Yes.
And I feel like that is even worse. It's like the icing on the cake, because it's coming from every angle. Now it's not just him. Now he has people to do his bidding for him to further harass and break you down and financially deplete you. And it's just exhausting.
And the other flying monkeys he had before that were his family. They had called me over this time and said stupid stuff to me, and you know, just,
you gold digging white bitch.
Yeah. And so when he gets with this woman who had just left an abusive relationship,
His current partner
had divorced. The mother of her children was an abusive alcoholic. And they had divorced, and then I think it was just a couple years later that she was with my ex-husband. But buys into his story and can't afford to take me to court. I had part of my upper hand before that was because he never worked. He didn't have any money to take me to court, and his family doesn't have any money. My family, I'm fortunate enough that they can support me through stuff like that, and did. So I could, in a sense, out money him until this woman came along, and then it was kind of a fair, equal battle. And so she steps into this mother role to Sophie while she's over there, which at first I didn't care. I don't care, you know, you're taking care of my kid. She had 3 other children. They were good to Sophie as far as I knew. Sophie never complained or anything.
How old was Sophie at this time?
4.
Okay.
And, but at the same time as when, I don't know if it was just because she was 4 or just because she didn't like it anymore, but that's when she first started saying she didn't want to go over there.
Okay.
And asking how long does she have to stay, and can she come home early, and all of those things you have to tell your kid no, which is terrible, you know. Still just,
I know, that's emotional. It's very emotional.
But as far as I knew, she was still safe, and you know.
Yeah.
So
it's very, very, very hard to have to be forced to send your child somewhere that you know is not safe for them when you have to abide by a court document.
Yes.
And this is where many abusers weaponize the system, which is where the the pedophilic term parental alienation comes in, which is a term that was created by a man to help abusers remain having custody of their children. And so women can present all the evidence of abuse, but if a father was to say that the woman is alienating the child, the father wins right away. And it's just the most excruciating pain to have your child tell you, why do I have to go? Why do I have to go? Please don't send me there. And you can't do anything about it. And we've talked about this in previous episodes as well, about the failure to protect laws, you know, and how that incarcerates the majority of women in our state of Oklahoma. And it's such a double-edged sword, because you're vocalizing and saying, hey, this person is violent, this person is abusive, this is going on here, this is going on here. But if you go against your order, okay, every other week visitation, whatever it is, you are in contempt.
Yes.
So if you willingly disobey a court order from a judge, even though you know and you've been vocalizing that abuse is happening, you are in contempt and you are the one that will get shit on. And that's the problem.
It is.
That is the problem with our system that needs to be lit on fire, broken down, and dismantled, because it continuously puts children back into the hands of their abusers time and time and time again. And then they still want to say, well, why didn't you leave? Why did you stay? Why did you do this? And I'm just like, we're asking the wrong question.
Right.
Why are we not asking, why did you abuse?
Right.
Why did you kill your family pet?
Right.
What, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why are we still so focused on the victim and not the abuser's behavior? Because they hold the victims responsible for the abuser's chronic brutality. And then, here we are,
right.
You know?
Right. And that's exactly how it all went down. You know, in the meantime, he's doing things to me to set me up.
Sure.
You know, he loved to call. And now if he were a parent, he would understand how hectic getting kids ready for school in the morning and out the door on time, all their stuff is, especially for my child that does not want to go to school.
Yeah, and especially if you have a child that their nervous system is dysregulated.
Yes. My child wanted to be with me.
Right.
She didn't not like school because school sucked. She just wanted to be with me.
Absolutely.
And so she was one of those kids I had to peel off of me at school. And so getting her up and dressed and sensory stuff too, you know.
Sure.
We have an outfit picked out, but the next morning when she tries it on, something doesn't feel right.
Right. And
so you have to find something else. And and you're still under the same time. And he likes to call then repeatedly. Call. If I'm not answering, call. And then it's, if I don't answer, why are you not letting me talk to my child? It's 7 o'clock in the motherfucking morning. I'm trying to get ready for work, to take myself to work. I'm trying to get my kid ready for work. And you want to talk to her for a couple minutes, and now I'm not letting her talk to you because I'm trying to be a parent.
When it's convenient for him.
Right. And, you know, just those types of things. Then after school, she'd come home and she'd play with, she had several girls here in our neighborhood that are the same age, and they'd play for hours every night.
Yeah. And
that's when he wants to call and talk. And he wants me to go stop her from playing.
Right.
To come in so she can talk to her dad.
Absolutely.
And when I'm not willing to do that again, I'm keeping him from being able to talk to her.
Right.
This man befriended a neighbor down the street of mine who started to give him information about me. Wow. Yes. The parent of one of the little girls. She testified in court for him against me, even though nothing she said was harmful because she didn't have anything harmful to say. I took this woman's child to Las Vegas in California on vacation with us before I knew any of this.
Wow.
And that's the way he was. He would who befriends somebody else that has no other relationship with that person in somebody else's neighborhood?
Right.
The only relationship you have with that person is that your daughter's friends with that kid while she's at her mom's house.
Right.
But you know, that's the type of stuff he did.
For sure. And I feel like that's very common, especially like in litigation cases. Like I know specifically like in my case, you start seeing questionnaires being sent from Susie Q. Who?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, because they don't have any consistent relationships.
Yeah.
They don't have any relationships that are long lasting.
That's right.
Anything like that. So it's like coworkers.
Yeah.
You know
what can I need you for something?
Correct. It's self-serving.
Yes.
It's very self-serving.
And I guarantee they haven't talked since.
Absolutely.
I guarantee they haven't.
Absolutely. So we are, okay, so you guys get taken to court. She takes you to court.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the beginning when other people start getting involved.
Okay.
Basically, before then, he'd never had a really good attorney. You know, it was kind of, like I said, the women before him weren't really into supporting it. So it was whatever money they could get together through the family, and then so they just couldn't afford $450 an hour freaking attorneys.
Yeah.
And my attorney wasn't great at the time, but she was what I could afford, and it wasn't $450 an hour. But she was better than his always.
And that's how they try to drain you financially.
Yeah.
Especially if you were maybe not working, they didn't allow you to work and things like that. And that's why many victims return to their abusers time and time again. I mean, hello, it took me 4 times. So, you know, and I'm not an anomaly to that, you know, because now in our state it takes 11 times for women to leave.
Oh, I didn't know that. That was
You know,
7.
yeah, it's increased now, you know, and so it's very important to understand the financial abuse is just such a huge part of these relationships and why women often return, because who's going to support you? Who's going to do this? Who's going to do this? You know, and when you don't have, many women don't have support. We don't have, may not have a supportive family. We may not have siblings or whatever the case may be. And there's a lot of isolation that also occurs in those relationships where victims are isolated from their families, or the narcissist will manipulate the victim's family and, you know, things like that. So it's very difficult to navigate through that. And no, it's not cheap. It's not.
And he tried all of that. He tried getting to my relatives and stuff and feeling out if he could get them, you know, his claws into them, and it wasn't going to happen. And he retaliated against my family. He filed a complaint against my brother's business. Wow. And that my brother had to be investigated for. It was, you know, he was found whatever without prejudice, meaning, you know, there was no basis to my ex-husband's claims or whatever, but it had to be on his record for 5 years, and, you know, so stuff like that, you know, which it's like, and you said earlier, you see them as a person.
Sure.
So it just blows your mind at how low they will go.
Yeah.
Because I would never, I don't care to this day the hell that man has put me through. I still wouldn't do some of the stuff he did to me.
Absolutely. I mean,
his family.
I was literally, he was putting my stuff on the front porch. Okay. I'd already called the police in front of our children. And I'm literally on the phone with insurance, giving insurance his card number to ensure his insurance doesn't lapse after I took myself off of it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, and it's wild. I'm leaving the dryer that I purchased because our dryer stopped working. He didn't want to buy a new one, but he could afford a $300 pair of shoes. You know. And I'm like thinking, well, I gotta leave this because of the girls, you know, they need to have, you know, and I'm like leaving things and like,
There were times through it I'd be like, why are we doing, like, we can pay for our daughter's college. Like, try to find a voice of reason in there, and it's not there.
Right.
It's not there.
Yeah.
And it just, man, the way it messes with your mind.
Yes.
Of what you thought people are or can be and what they can't be, and it just, man, it really messed with me, you know.
Sure.
And so this stuff is happening behind the scenes, and this whole time I'm trying to maintain my mind that I'm not crazy, that I'm not all these things he's saying, that the constant gaslighting.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times I question myself, like, man, am I keeping her from him? Am I doing those things, you know? And I had a friend who, surprise, surprise, lost custody of her children to her narcissistic ex, and I would run stuff by her just to make sure I wasn't doing those things.
Wow.
Because she had the perspective of the non-custodial parent, you know, and, you know, every time she's like, no, what? You know, what? That's crazy, you know, and even though the same stuff's happening to her over there, but,
and I think that's hard being, like, for me as an autistic person with ADHD, like, I'm an external processor, so, like, I have to talk to, like, 4 different people and verbalize that out loud in order for me to comprehend and assure that what I'm saying, like, is okay or whatever.
Right.
You know, so that's exhausting in itself, is having to talk to so many different people to just, like, feel validated.
Yeah. And what's crazy on top of that is I'm going to work every day with a smile on my face. Nobody knows anything that's going on.
Right.
You know, putting my all into these kids that I, like, those kids and my child were what I lived for, you know,
and at this time you're a special education teacher.
Yes.
Okay.
And, you know, another red flag that I didn't say earlier is before we got married is, I wanted my students to come to our wedding. He didn't want him there. And I love the kids I work with, you know, and there's one guy I've posted on him on Facebook before named Earl, and like Earl is my man. We had some kind of connection that is just unexplainable, and still do whenever I see him, but my ex-husband couldn't stand him. Said he was disgusting. Is the word he used for the kid that I loved most in my life at the time, because I didn't have my own child, you know. And but again, just but so when the wife now gets involved is when other people start getting involved in court, and our judge changed. So first we have Judge Walkley. She's the one that made him pay the child support, brought down his time, all that, assigned us a guardian ad litem who, you know, I didn't have any problems with. I didn't feel one way or another about him. You know, I always kind of had a feeling, hoped that when someone else would come in, I'd have this hope that they could finally, someone will see what I'm saying, you know.
Hear me.
Yes. And this guy, I mean, I didn't feel like he was for me or against me. I felt like he was neutral, you know, but my ex-husband hated him. And because he wasn't buying into what my ex-husband was feeding him. You know, he was trying to hear both sides. He would hear from my ex-husband, who was calling him constantly, that I'm having to pay half of. And then he would call me and be like, hey, you know, run it past me. And I'd be like, well, actually, let me get my binders out.
Sure.
And then he'd go back to my ex-husband and be like, well, she's, you know, she has the documentation. Well, so my ex-husband hates him.
Of course. Anybody that can see through, they will do anything to remove that person.
That's right.
Whether it's children's therapists, other attorneys, anybody that they cannot manipulate, they will extract.
Right.
And I mean, that's important
to
understand, because there are people that they can easily manipulate because they're master manipulators. Even though half the shit they say is just fucking word salad, you know what I mean? But like that charm, that, you know, that they got it all together.
And they like everything that you like. And,
correct. They're very easy to persuade. So, not only do they
So they take me back to court to get rid of this GAL.
What was the reasoning?
I can't remember.
Okay.
I can't remember. And we go before another judge for the first time. So we no longer have Judge Walkley, who's been with us for years at this time. And she's kind of starting to pick up on like, dude, why? Because I had never taken him to court, ever taken him to court. He was never worth my time or money yet, you know. And it had become a cycle to where it was every 3 years he would take me. And so I knew that I was getting ready to be taken back to court. I remember making a joke with the guy I worked with. I was like, man, it's been 3 years. My ex-husband should be taking me back to court soon. Wow. I shit you not. A couple weeks later, I got my summons. And I went to my friend at work and I said, I told you. And he was like, you are what?
Yeah.
And I said, it's a cycle.
Sure.
And so now we have a different judge. And we go from Walkley to, what's his name? His sister's a state representative.
What county are you in?
Cleveland.
Tupper?
Can't remember. I'll think of it soon.
That's okay.
Sister. But anyway, so like I said before, my husband's new wife worked in the DA's office for several years. While she worked in the DA's office, and that was several years prior to this, she had been in her new job as the head of the child abuse place for about 5 years at this point. So before that, she worked in the DA's office with our new judge. And they went to high school together.
Oh. How nice.
So we get in there and
which should have been a conflict of interest.
right, Judge, whatever his name is, sees that we should change guardian ad litem and gives us Beth Childers. Is that her name? Bridget Childers. That just, and at this point, and they've got my life so chaotic that I'm forgetting appointments. And I was on gabapentin, which was terrible for memory, you know. But they were keeping me so confused that I was
disorganized.
Yes, and challenging everything because my daughter had been in. I had the reason they filed against my brother is because one of my brother's psychologists, who just contracts with him, he doesn't work for my brother, had diagnosed Sophie with anxiety and depression.
Sure.
Because in my mind, I'm like, hey, we can get in like tomorrow, you know, we don't have to pay the $1,500 evaluation fee. Like, why the fuck not? You know, why would we not do this? Well, my ex-husband sees me as basically convincing these people to give my child a diagnosis. And that was his problem with my brother. I'm just trying to get her diagnosed with something.
Yep.
When she's showing all these concerning behaviors. You
God
know?
forbid you advocate for your child.
Yes. And I mean, trying to get her to go with him on her weekends has evolved to the point to where she's throwing up before she leaves or barricading herself in her room. So it's gotten really bad. She was 8 when she was diagnosed with depression. 8. And so I had gotten her a psychologist in Norman who didn't work for my brother. He didn't have any relationship to my brother, you know, made sure all those, made sure none of that was happening. And she was great. Sophie liked her. Sophie went to her for years. But my ex-husband thought, for whatever reason, that Sophie's counseling was also his opportunity to go into counseling with her and talk to the counselor. Which I'm like, nah. This is her counseling. This isn't parent counseling, you know, whatever. But he insisted on, and sometimes the wife would go too. They'd have these little family counselings where basically they would tell the counselor that everything my daughter's telling you is a lie.
Wow. Her
mother's brainwashed her, whatever. If she's telling you that, it's a lie. And the counselor wasn't digging it, you know. But, and the counselor had told me, you know, I do not want to have to go to court for this. You know, it's not in the best interest of your child. It's not good for counseling relationships. And I said, well, I don't think, I should have thought, but I don't think he's going to try to do that to you, which he totally did, try to get her summoned and everything. But we go through the years it takes to get to trial of court. Hell,
Years. Okay. People think that whenever you get an attorney, things like that, and you're going to be in court in 3 months. Baby, I've been in this for 2 years already, okay? And it takes time, and which is typically what abusers want.
Yes.
Because it's more financial abuse.
Yes.
It's post-separation abuse through the system. They're able to still abuse you through the system, through legal fees, through harassment, through, like you said, filing motions after motions after motions to keep you in the system.
Yes.
And that's...
Yep. And then putting off a hearing, and,
Oh yeah, you gotta go on a TDY?
Yeah.
Now we have to reschedule?
Right. Yes, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And by this time my ex is a Army reservist as well.
Love it.
And I did try to contact the command.
They don't do shit.
They don't do shit.
They don't do shit.
They do not believe the crazy ex-wife.
No, and my experience with the military, they enable.
Yes.
They enable abusers. They
cover for them. They lie for them.
Absolutely.
All of that.
Every single time. And I mean, these are things that my ex-husband bragged about. Oh, my commander's good about covering things up. When he banged his head against the wall at work in front of his coworkers because he was upset that I was trying to leave him for the first time. Big ass goose egg on his head, and then showed up to work the next day with his face black and blue because he punched himself repeatedly. Nobody asked.
Not surprised.
Nobody checked on me. Nobody checked on the kids. Nobody asked, hey, what's going on? But I'm pretty sure that he told somebody that someone beat him up in the Moore Warren parking lot. Because that's what he told me first. And then it changed, and they just don't do anything to protect the dependents that are in the service. The ones that are staying at home for months at a time alone. Like, I've been a single parent for 12 years.
Right.
That's all I know.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, this man was an absent parent in the home. You can provide all day you want to, but you were emotionally, spiritually, physically absent and abusive.
Yes.
So,
And that's exactly what it was. And so years go by, we get the new judge, we get the guardian ad litem, and my daughter's psychologist is, after we get to trial, my ex-husband on the stand accuses my daughter's counselor of being incompetent because she has dementia. He's decided she has dementia.
Wow.
And my brother's witnessing this and has, some duty to report if somebody's claiming that somebody is unable to fulfill their commitment to the psychological board or whatever. So gets the psychologist that way. So she retires because of that, because he's made this on record allegation that she's not able to do her job.
How were they not able to check that and confirm that?
They didn't.
Wow.
I mean, they just didn't. They were really taking this man's word for everything he said. And he had gotten a new attorney. And one thing that I know a lot of people aren't able to do, but I feel like that I've been able to do, is I don't hold it against attorneys in that they're doing their job, so to speak, and some of them are really good at it, and they'll do it by any means possible. And if that's your job and that's how you take that approach, then whatever, I get it. You're making your money. But he hired a $450 an hour attorney, excellent attorney, smart. I mean, just woman to woman, I can give her that, even though I can't get past the how could you do that to another woman? The stuff you're saying,
right?
That what you're saying in court is not. How can you watch this woman sit here and bawl while he sits there with no expression on his face, black eyes.
Right.
No expression, and I'm over here
Discharge.
mustering every ounce of energy I have to not boo-hoo.
Right.
Because I know that that doesn't look good. That makes me look like I don't have control.
God forbid you have emotions.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That I don't have control, and that maybe I am as crazy as he says, you know, because.
Well, and let's talk about being in the courtroom in itself is traumatizing. It's so it's anxiety ridden. You know, I just over the last year, every time I enter the courtroom, you know, I'd hype myself up before I go in and say affirmations, you know, and none of that ever worked. The moment you step foot in that courtroom, my body was shaking.
Yep.
You know, I'd have my hand on my heart trying to regulate myself, you know, and that's the way they want you to look. And as a neurodivergent person, it's even more anxiety ridden, I feel, because you think you want to have your shit together. And then once you do, well, why can't you get your dates together?
Right.
Well, let me, you know, and it's like,
yes.
Man,
Yes.
the pressure is
Yes.
on. They don't care. They just truly have, there's no empathy, and they're so desensitized.
Yes.
So
Yes.
desensitized.
Yes, they are.
So.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was trying to say about them in that position, is that they've become so desensitized to it that.
Sure.
But he had a good attorney, and we go. It somehow within all of that, it's decided. No, actually, before that, we get assigned to Angela Wheeler, who's a child counselor. I later found out that Angela and Bridget often work together with families and are often assigned together by this judge. And they keep these families in this counseling for way longer than they should, when no progress is being made, when the child's saying, I don't want to go to that counselor, when the child's saying that counselor's telling my dad what I'm telling her, that counselor's allowing my dad to ambush me in these meetings and letting the wife come in too, and they're just telling me how wrong I am, and that, did your mom tell you to say that? And, you know, in these counseling sessions, and going on for over a year, that I'm having to pay half of all of this, and not realizing that it's all being set up to when we get to trial. So when we get to trial, Bridget tells of that she just sees a child that loves her dad and just wants to spend more time with her dad. And the counselor, who's never evaluated me, never evaluated Sophia, refused to give me any of the documentation that I'm entitled to, never had me, who was the custodial parent, sign any paperwork. She gets on the stand and says in court that she thinks that I have some mental health issues going on, even though she's never evaluated me and I wasn't her patient, and tells the judge that she thinks, although she's never evaluated Sophia, that I'm the reason that Sophia keeps saying that she doesn't want to be with her dad. And that the child has gone so far to say that dad makes her uncomfortable when she's in the shower and he comes in to pee while she's in the shower. She was 13 at the time. And, you know, well, even though there's 2 other bathrooms in the house as well.
Right.
And an outside, you're a man. But you have to come in there, while your daughter's showering, you have to come in there and go to the bathroom. Or you walk in after she's gotten out of the shower and she doesn't have time to get her towel up over herself, and you stand there and continue to talk to her. Instead of, oh, excuse me, like me as her mother does.
Right.
Oh, God, sorry, let me know when you're ready or whatever. No. And says the child's gone so far to tell us those things, and we just don't believe that's accurate. I find this out in court. And I'm like, hold on. I'm finding this out in court. Right. This counselor never said to me, hey, this is what your daughter's disclosed to us. And I don't know if, because it's not abuse, if they would have even been able to do that, you know. But if it was worried them enough to bring it up in court, I feel like you should have brought it to me before we got in court.
It is, yeah.
But you're surprising me with it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, which I don't know what to think about, and I'm trying to pay attention to what's going on and prepare myself because I'm up on the stand next and all these things, you know, and I'm pissed because I know what this counselor is doing is totally against her board rules and all of those things. And looking at the judge, and he's just soaking it all in, and my attorney's trying, you know, but she wasn't good enough for them. She wasn't, you know, she'd been good enough until they got someone great. And so I lost custody of her that day. They got me on the stand. They got me worked up. I fell right into their trap, which is exactly what the attorneys do. You know, they try to confuse you. It worked. You got me confused. You got me upset. You got me angry. You did all those things, and
You're vulnerable. They weaponize your vulnerability.
Yeah, they gave him custody. They gave him full custody, and I got visitation. And he had educational final say. I'm a teacher of 17 years. Teacher of the year, all that shit, all these extra awards and shit. He gets educational final say because I was trying to get my child on an IEP, and he didn't want her on an IEP. Because again, I'm just trying to get her these diagnoses and things. I immediately filed my attorney and started looking for another attorney. My parents said, we don't care how much they cost. Fine, they don't have to be from this state. We will fly them in. Whatever you need to do, you get the best.
Wow.
If there's experts we need to call, contact, and I said, okay. So I found a guy. He was good. Well, first, I get recommended this brother and sister team. And the sister was like, I need somebody that was going to stand up for me, not just be quiet and agree and all of these things, which is what she was. And so, because I immediately filed whatever it is, you an appeal, I guess.
Sure.
And we go back. We're doing this. He has custody for 30 days or whatever, and it's every other weekend for me till we get back in court. And something happened that I know what it was. So Sophie's in 7th grade by this time. She goes to her school counselor and tells her counselor about the showering and stuff. And the counselor is a mandated reporter.
Sure.
So
now let's just disclose. Teachers, counselors, therapists, DHS workers are mandated reporters for abuse by law. Okay, anytime they suspect child abuse, anything, they are mandated reporters. And I swear 92.5% of the time when these allegations are reported, DHS doesn't do shit about it. No. And I'm talking directly from the therapist.
Right.
Requesting forensic interviews. DHS won't do shit.
Right. So she tells the counselor this. The counselor, of course, calls the police officer in. My daughter tells the same thing. They call DHS, and the counselor calls me and tells me, I'm teaching. I get told this, so of course I drop everything and leave to go to my daughter. And the school recommends that we take her to like a women's crisis center and to do a rape kit. Because another thing that my daughter disclosed was that she didn't know if she had a dream or if it really happened, but she thought that my ex-husband had come into the room while she was sleeping and violated her in some way. And she had told me this on the phone a few days before, and she said, but I don't want to, she said something happened, but I'll tell you when I get home. And I said, okay. So she comes home and she tells me, and because of the situation I'm in, another one of those terrible guilts I'll carry forever, she tells me this, but because she says, I don't know if it happened, I didn't report it. I'm still trying to think, like, I have in the back of my head what I heard in court that she'd said to the counselor, and the counselor discloses in court. Now this added thing is onto it that he might have actually done something, and so I'm thinking about it, and then that Monday is when she tells her counselor. And the counselor tells me, go ahead and call and report, as well, what she had told you. So I do. And the DHS people act real nice and everything on
Sure.
the phone. But we get to luckily we go to the Women's Crisis Center, and they were the helpful people, because I'm like,
Yes.
I told her, I said, I didn't know how, it's not that I didn't believe her, it's just that she didn't know. And the woman was like, it's not uncommon for kids to not know if it really happened.
Sorry.
Oh,
You're right.
it's not uncommon for kids to not know if something happened because it's such a traumatic event.
Absolutely.
She's like, we hear that we hear it from grown women.
Yeah.
That don't know if it was a dream or if it was real.
Well, especially, like, I know my abuser sexually molested me multiple times while I was sleeping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And spousal rape
Right.
in partnership
Right.
is a thing.
Yes.
But the way women are so brainwashed to
Yes.
think that your body is not your own,
That's right.
that your partner possesses ownership, that you have to have your body available to your partner at all times, and that means that they're allowed to finger you in your sleep.
That's right.
Like that's
And I had no relationship to my body anyway,
Sure.
because of what had already happened to me.
Absolutely.
There was no connection between me and my body.
Yeah.
So the Women's Crisis Center, they're very good to her, and just what you're comfortable with, you tell us. And Sophie didn't want to say it again, so she had written everything down. And they were great. By then it was 5 days later, so they didn't expect anything from a rape kit or anything, and Sophie didn't want a full examination. She was 13, she hadn't started her period or anything by then, so a full examination. She had agreed to like some swabbing on some exterior parts or whatever. So that's what gets us back in court. With this new attorney that's timid, quiet, and mind you, his attorney is very aggressive.
Yeah.
Yes, overstimulating. I mean, I am not easily intimidated by people at all, but in a courtroom with this attorney, I was, and so, because I'm like, nuh-uh, bring her back. She needs to come home, Well, the guardian ad litem, Bridget, and the counselor, Angela, think it's best for her to go stay with my ex-husband's family. Not me, not my family, but his family, while a forensic investigation is done. And that me is that I am to have no contact with her. So I do nothing. And not only did I lose custody, but now I can't even speak to my daughter. And for 6 weeks, it takes. Now, during the trial, Andre, the wife, who worked with the judge, who went to school with the judge, who has a professional relationship through the child abuse place that she runs now with the guardian ad litem and with the counselor, is sitting in the back room, in the back of the courtroom watching all of this. With her sister, who runs drug court and knows all of these people as well. And they placed my daughter with my ex-husband's sister and her husband. They're a cute little Christian family and that's saved these kids from Africa.
And the white savior complex.
Yeah. And so my daughter lives there for 6 weeks and I have no contact with her. But I filed that attorney and I'm like, get me the best attorney. They finally get me this guy out of Oklahoma City who was raped I take him my 2 boxes of stuff, and he spends, he's like, I know this, he's like, I understand the urgency. He said, I know it does, but you have to give me time to go through everything, because I have to go through everything. I don't have your backstory.
Yeah.
It was good, but I couldn't, you know, you don't want to wait a week
It's
or
hard.
2 weeks or knowing,
Yeah.
you know. And meanwhile, my daughter's still seeing this counselor through all of this, and who's already said she doesn't believe her. But you still have to go to counseling with a counselor who doesn't believe you while you're going to be getting a forensic investigation.
Right.
They can't send her to the place that does the forensic investigations in Norman, because that's the place the wife runs. So they have to send her to the one in the city.
Mary Abbott's?
Yes. Yes, the director of that place is my husband's ex-wife. I'll get to that point.
Wow.
She's the ex now, as well. Yeah. During all of this, you have to call the cops, because it happened in Noble, where he lived. I had to talk to some investigator down there who made sure that she didn't go to Mary Abbott's and went to Children in a Rent, or whatever the city place is called. And again, I tell him, I'm like, you know, I didn't know, you know, I don't, because he asked me, do you think? And I said, I don't know. But I'm not going to not believe my child. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, we want children to speak up, but when they do, we're not going to believe them.
Right.
And we're going to say that it's hearsay.
Right, right. And that was one thing I was adamant about. You're never going to get me to say that I don't believe her.
Yeah.
I can say that I don't know, but you're not going to say that she's lying.
And then you want to further perpetuate that with women when they do speak out as adults.
Yeah.
We go not being believed our entire lives,
Right.
you know, but hey, we're still a problem.
Right, exactly. Oh, one more I left out was my daughter actually did a 5-day stay, inpatient stay, because at one point she got suicidal, and again told her counselor, this was while she was with the dad, and counselor called me, I came and picked her up, I took her to the emergency room. My ex-husband showed up, made such an ass of himself that security had to take him off campus and ban him from campus because he wanted to be in there with my child. And this is before he might have touched her at night, but between I found out in court, and the doctors were great, you know, but she ended up going inpatient, told those doctors the same thing she'd been telling everybody the entire time.
Right.
Nothing's changed from beginning to end. Her story never changed.
Right.
And she's tired of repeating it.
Right.
And she's told me that. Why?
Right.
Nobody believes me. Why do I have to keep telling people this? It doesn't matter. They're not in it. To get a child to keep going, it's just awful. And so she didn't stay there, which was awful. Of course, I beat them there, and so they let me be the parent, go in with her. But they already knew from the hospital that he'd showed his ass, so they weren't very happy about him either. But he tried to, they said he would call daily, trying to set up appointments for him to meet with the psychologist there, which they don't do.
Yeah.
And they said, we don't do that. And he was, well, I'll have my attorney call, blah, 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 trying to threaten them. So after 6 weeks, we finally get back in court. Custody is reversed back to me because it's not that I can't remember the terms that they used, but it wasn't, they couldn't clear him, basically. They couldn't prove anything, but they couldn't clear him. And that was what my new attorney, who was, like I said, was great, really stuck to. Like, she has told you, she has told you, and I mean, he called everybody out. You went to high school, this person, didn't you go to high school with her? Is what he did to the judge.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Call that shit out.
Don't you have a relationship with Mary Abbott House? And don't, did all of this. I mean, basically cleared the courtroom for me. That I've been needing this entire time.
Yeah.
And the judge was speechless.
Yeah.
And
it's a conflict of interest.
Yes.
How coincidental.
Yes.
That all of you have an affiliation.
That's right.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about it.
And the judge was speechless, but my attorney had talked to the judge in chambers before and let him know that these were things that I was concerned about, all of these different relationships. So he wasn't caught completely off guard.
Right.
He just still didn't know how to respond to it.
Yeah.
you know, and Bridget and Angela are caught completely off guard, you know, and my attorney's like, and my client intends to file against your board, my client intends to file a complaint with the guardian ad litem board, you know, and, you know,
Absolutely.
all of these, clears out the courtroom, it's reversed, she comes back to me. We have to go back for child support. It's supposed to be. And it's, again, probably another 30 days, but 2 weeks later, my attorney calls me and he says, "Are you sitting down?" And my child's home with me, so I know it's not anything like that. And I'm like, "Yeah, what's going on?" He's like, "Check your email." I checked my email and it said, signed off by the judge already, that my ex-husband's decided he no longer wants a relationship with my daughter.
Wow.
So, that's great, but it's not great.
Right.
You know, it's, wow, man, you did all of this, not to mention what you did to me these last 15 years,
Right.
you know, time we were together,
Right.
even past that to all of this. Not to mention what you did to me, but you've done to my child, and now you're gonna walk.
Free.
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 Free. And never mind whether my child's gonna have some relief from this, because she will in the moment.
Right.
But you waited till my child was 14 years old for her to know that her dad doesn't want anything to do with her. Not just her dad, but her whole family on that side has decided they don't want anything to do with her. Man, it was great to know that we never had to deal with him again, so to speak. But at the same time, you piece of shit.
Yeah.
You piece of what was the fucking point?
Right. Yeah.
The point was you had to go as low as you could go.
Right.
The only reason I know now that he did that was because his ex-wife filed for divorce, or his wife filed for divorce after this.
Oh, he ain't got the DA on
That's
his
right.
side. You know
That's
what I'm
right.
saying?
Right. Well, he didn't have the money anymore.
Sure.
Because she's the money.
Sure.
She was the financier of all of this, you know. And she's tired of paying for it. She's a little uneasy about these things she's heard. She's starting to dawn on her that she's been complicit in all of this.
Yeah. You've been an enabler of his behavior.
Yes.
And inflicting harm.
Yes. And who are you? You run this. And he got you.
Yeah.
He got you. He got everybody in here.
Right.
And you're just now picking up on it. And so now so they would ask me, you know, did you ever think that he had these kind of tendencies? And I was like, well, no. Well, he did date that girl that was in high school that he was going to marry, you know, and then he did have the weird relationship with his ex-wife's oldest daughter. Weird relationship. And then when I met him, he did have all these young high school girls coming over to watch his child and stuff like that, you know. But I didn't put all that together then, so no, I didn't think that he would. But I never knew that he would do any of this shit,
Right.
you know. So
And there's still that level of denial, I know, at least for me, of like, you're not wanting to accept that reality.
that's right.
Like, it's literally like you're watching a scene from a movie.
Yes.
And then when you're living it, you're in such a state of like, what the fuck is this?
Yes.
Like, how is this how did I get here?
Yes.
How is this my current reality?
Yes. Yes.
You know, and then when things continue to unravel and spiral, it's just like, again, the psychological abuse is just torment.
Yes.
I mean, you are a prisoner of your own mind
Yes.
in those times,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah, and it was crazy. So that happened in August of 2021, I think it was. Yep. And I haven't seen or heard from him since at all, or anyone in his family. Except that my daughter goes to church at the church that they used to go to, and she's seen his family a couple of times. They act like they don't know who she is. Just recently she saw him there. She said he had no reaction, none. Every once in a while she checks his Instagram and stuff, he was living with another woman last Christmas. Don't know if they're still together or not. You know, so that cycle's continuing. She still says that she's glad she's done with him and things, but she still kind of has a relationship with her older sister. But that's been affected by all this because older sister is like this with dad, which is not surprising to me because she's always been afraid of him.
It's not uncommon,
right?
Especially
and
if
she's
they're
the golden child.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And
I think I've talked about this before too. Like, if there's multiple children, okay, like in your case, your daughter is the one that was discarded.
That's right.
Because she's the one that spoke up.
Right.
And when there's multiple children involved in these dysfunctional family systems, each child will be the golden child at some point in their development. Right. Okay. And once that child starts to have their own thoughts, their own thinking, asserting their individuality, their body autonomy, they will slowly get discarded.
Yes.
And if they can no longer be manipulated, you know, like in my case, like all my kids went through that. Now my son is being discarded, but Phoenix is the golden,
right?
You know, she's still so young, she's still so impressionable, and that's, you know, she loves her daddy, you know, and it's hard when it's so hard because when you see your children seeing the same things that you wanted to see as well. Yes. That's very, very hard to filter.
Yes, it is.
It's so hard because what child doesn't want to have a relationship? You know, but they're learning very early on that it's my responsibility to appease daddy and make daddy happy. Yes. This is where those early people pleasers start, you know? Yeah.
I mean, he did all the manipulating. I don't know if yours has done this, but he was getting deployed. Now, mind you, his deployments, because when he would deploy, I wanted custody. I wanted her during that time. Why are you going to stay with the stepmom? Stay with me. Well, we'd have to go to court because he'd take me to court over it, you know. And
my mom's going to watch them.
Yeah, he'd win. She'd have to go to his parents for the 2 weeks. And that was his deployment. 2 weeks to Lawton. Is what he's calling deployments. And I'm like, no, I'm not talking
the little small TDYs for training.
Yeah, AT basically.
Yes.
And you know, he would cry about how much he would miss her to her.
Yeah.
When she's 3, 4, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna miss you so much.
Don't forget to call daddy.
Yeah, every day. Yeah. And it would just guilt her and
guilt and shame.
Oh man, it was just So I mean, to say it's over, part of it's over.
Sure.
But now I deal with the fallout of it in my child. I mean, it's been hell to get her regulated, to get her on the right meds, to get her out of that dark, deep hole of depression. You know, it took me about 10 months this past year, doctor visit after doctor visit. I mean, I was unemployed after I left teaching before I started my other job, thank God.
Yeah.
Because she could barely go to school. There were times I'd walk up to that door, what am I going to find when I open this door? You know, she was that deep. I'm doing it by myself.
Right.
Because he got to walk away. And who could do that?
Right.
Like, one thing that's, I don't know why it's having such an effect on me is this Gaza stuff. It's just like kids, man. What are you doing to a kid? Like, you're taking away any opportunity for them to have a functional life despite all the other shit that just is the world that they're going to have to deal with.
Right.
You know, why would you why would you add to that? You know, it just tears me up. She's smart, you know, and she's the most loving, deeply empathetic, ADHD, but still frustrated. Why does stuff happen to me? Why is this my life? you know, and it's just,
Right.
it's hard to explain, you know, and you feel so guilty
Yeah.
for it, you know. It's like, I would never wish not having my child, but why the fuck did I pick that piece of shit, you know? And I can't hate him because I would not have had this child,
Sure.
you know?
That's a very hard emotion to navigate.
Yeah, I want this child, you know, and it's just hard, you know, but we do it,
Right.
you know, and I do everything I can to get her everything that she needs, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. She's in the church, I'm not, but I'll drive her.
Right.
It's not having a negative impact on her. I'm not worried about any,
Right.
you know, it's not getting weird or anything
Right.
like that, so, you know, and I don't know, parenting's hard. It's hard anyway, and then you add this stuff on top of it, and then not to mention my own neurodivergency, my ADHD, my anxiety, my depression. I have to maintain all of that the whole time, you know, and
That's hard, being a neurodivergent parent, parenting neurodivergent kids, and I think that's a conversation Latricia and I have really wanted to talk about, is those challenges, and then when you're navigating through trauma, it's so difficult because we get overstimulated.
Yeah.
We have to regulate ourselves, and so like I know the times when I don't have my children, like I had to learn to be very intentional with that time alone, because you know, I've grown so much just within the last year of going from, I mean, literally being in the hospital, having panic attacks, not being able to talk to my children for 6 days, and my immediate thought is, he's taking them out of state, he's murdering them. Like, and those intrusive thoughts are so real because I know what he's capable of and the violence that we've experienced with him. You know, and that's not what you want to be thinking about, but that's the reality. Of, and every time you think of, this can't be my life, and then something worse would happen. You know, and then it just, it doesn't, there's no warrant for what you there's no expectation anymore. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, like, you don't know what to expect is what I mean. There's just so much anxiety ridden of, you know, and then just like, in my case, like having a child around another woman that is actually unsafe, doesn't have custody of her own children, has history of abuse and neglect. Like, it's very difficult, you know, and these patterns continue of, and of course, like, what kid doesn't want to have another child to play with in the home? You know, and not understanding, like, these are the cycles of manipulation of, you know, this happened with me and his ex-wife. I'm going to have an affair with my wife, get another woman pregnant really quick. Well, of course, now my daughters are excited about a new baby brother, you know, and so then I'm thrown into that parenting role, you know, and so like I resonated with so much of your story. And then what's ironic and unique about Nicole and I's story is, I think we met just a couple years back. I think it was like in 2020 was the first time I met you. And I was working in the salon at that time, right before COVID. And it wasn't until last year when she came to my house and got her hair done one day, and we were sharing stories, and we had the same judge, whereas mine was now a judge, which was her previous guardian ad litem. And that was really hard to hear because of what I had already experienced with Judge Childers in VPO court. And she was our VPO judge, and it was so incredibly heartbreaking to be, I mean, our very first hearing, not being allowed to present any evidence, and having the children taken off of my emergency VPO that was like 5 pages long, and his VPO was written in his mother's handwriting.
Not surprised.
And being told that my children weren't in danger and that I need to learn to get along with him, and I'll see you in 3 months.
That's right.
And devastating. You know, and then the last hearing we had in August of last year was, you know, I had tried very hard to keep my emotional composure every time.
Yep.
And I had my YWCA advocate with me, and they subpoenaed the DHS worker. This was our first caseworker, and he had gotten an attorney at that time. And and mind you, because of the person I am, I was so desperate to be heard. You know, and I don't know legal stuff. I don't know anything. You know, and I was pro se. I was trying to represent myself. I went and spent like 2 hours with her because I'm like, yeah, he's getting charged for this shit. I will give you everything. I have nothing to hide.
That's right. Yep.
Nothing to hide. And she was taken back, and like, she seemed very compassionate at first, right? And very just, I guess, astonished by the amount of evidence that I had. I mean, I gave her everything. None of that was brought up in court. None of it. And instead, she stood in front of the judge and said, Miss Pennyfeather calls DHS every time she doesn't get her way in court. You know, and it was just like, wow. You know, and you just can't help but laugh, like, internally, because it's so painful that you're just like, you feel like psychotic.
Yes.
You know, and the last hearing we had, she subpoenaed the DHS worker, and I was like, kind of baffled by it, because I'm like, you guys have told me in every hearing that I can't talk about the children because they had been removed from the BPO. So I understood legally I got to keep the focus about our abuse.
Right.
And so I was doing that, and I was trying to present evidence. I then even tried to file a motion a week before that, a week before our last hearing, to add the children back on my BPO. And I remember being in court. It was just me in there, and I was trying to hand her the therapist reports. She literally just looked at the first page, and then she closed it, and she was looking at the first page, and she closed it, and she said, well, I think Mr. Pennyfeather should be here. And I'm just like, I'm trying to protect my children, and you're ignoring therapist reports. And then she said that they were hearsay. And of course, me not knowing like legal stuff like that, and I'm just like, well, then subpoena the therapist to come testify. If you think it's hearsay. I mean, this is a direct report from her. You know, so they subpoenaed the caseworker, and then we get in court, and, you know, she says all that. DHS worker comes and speaks, doesn't have any information, doesn't have any paperwork, can't even remember what fucking day she went to my house. And said in front of the courtroom that my son had confided in her that his dad had strangled him to the point to where he lost consciousness. Talked about the sexual abuse that my daughter had experienced with his girlfriend's son. And she said, yeah, but she was just playing a game that she didn't like. And then also referred to the strangulation as my son playing a game that he didn't like with his dad. And she revoked both VPOs that day. Revoked both VPOs, and I immediately just lost it because I was just like, I already didn't feel protected. We had competing VPOs because he filed one first, you know, and I just remember like the police officer handing me a tissue, and I just was like, I went in the bathroom and I just cried for like 30 minutes. And I was just like, this is unbelievable. How can you say that you protect victims and children, and you are knowingly, with good conscience, sending my child back home with their abuser? And the one time I did try to, after my kids were in tears, like begging me not to go over there because he was physically abusing their older sisters during that time. And they were scared. And I was really trying to like know legal terminations and stuff, and I was like, okay, like they have a voice, they can say that they don't want to go, and that's also, you know, forget what the term for it is, I forget what it's called, but anyways, and so I was like, they have voice, they don't want to go. And then ironically, during that time, the day before is when he had physically assaulted one of my oldest, which are my bonus children. And I reported that, called the police officer, and he told me he can't control how he chooses to discipline his child, and that unless there's a bruise or a broken bone, that there's nothing they can do. And I said, so let me get this straight. It's a felony that he's already strangled my children and myself. And how are you supposed to know if my child is okay if you're not going over there to do an investigation?
Right.
So you're ignoring it. Yeah, so fuck more police.
Right.
Because they didn't help with anything, you know, from the day one. And I still have the voicemail to this day. His attorney called and she threatened me that she was going to post a bond on me if I did not return the children to him in 24 hours, and that they were going to file another motion to enforce the custody. What do you do?
I know.
You know, and it was just like, I just remember holding them crying, and I hated that they were seeing that from me.
Yeah.
You know, and I just was like, what am I supposed to do? I'm knowingly telling you these things are happening, and you're forcing me to send my child here. You know, and it just, so yeah, I filed an 18-page judicial complaint against her and the family court judge.
Good.
You know what they told me when I got my little 1-page letter back? This is out of our jurisdiction. Is it?
Right. Right.
We wouldn't be in your courtroom if it was out of your jurisdiction. And it sure as hell isn't military jurisdiction, even though he shows up in his uniform every hearing, which is a violation.
Yeah.
But hey, you know? And I mean, it took me 11 months to get an attorney. No, after no, after no, after no. And I remember 2 attorneys that I've talked to. And one of them literally told me, she said, I don't know if you think your little story is going to be the save all women and children. And she said, but I'm not going to help you get custody of your children. And I said, okay. And I said, well, it sounds like we won't be working together.
Right.
Have a great fucking day, or the day you deserve.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it just baffled me. And then another woman was like, you know, making it seem like my focus is like the girlfriend, you know, I'm just this bitter fucking ex who just doesn't. And she said, well, that's not important. And I said, so it's okay for him to be in contempt and violate the decree by not having any romantic partners stay the night. It's okay for him to violate the VPO and show up at a school event. It's okay for him to do all these things, but fuck me. You know what I'm saying? And that's how they treat you. And I think it's just unfortunate that there's so many, they put domestic violence cases in high conflict cases, which I feel like are 2 very different things. It's not, it takes one person to cause conflict. And that's what people don't understand about domestic violence in high conflict cases. It takes one person to cause conflict. And this is not a high conflict case. This is a domestic violence and continuous abuse through the legal system case. And then you have these judges that have no training in trauma, no training in psychological abuse, no training in coercive control, no training in children's psychology, you know, and they don't understand the effects that trauma has on a child's brain from infancy. So from the moments that our children were in utero, they were already being born into trauma.
Yes.
Because of the stress levels that we were under in our relationships.
Yes.
You know, and so when you're trying to express these concerns, you know, they just chalk children up to being so resilient, and children are resilient. And it's like, resilience isn't a thing that is long term.
Right. Right.
It's not supposed to be.
Mm-mm.
And to be so uninformed to think that children can just withstand they'll forget. They're not going to remember. But again, trauma is not, and Dr. Bruce Perry explains this very well, that, and Dr. Gabor Mate, that trauma is not the experiences itself that happen to us.
Mm-hmm. My daughter's going to come through.
Sure.
That's fine.
It's how our bodies feel.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
It's weird how along the way it just keeps getting more and more unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this. It just over and over again. You know, it's just.
Yeah, and luckily, like, you know, like in states like California, like they're making really big strides in the family court. And like November is Family Court Awareness Month as well. And it's important for us to highlight on these things because training in coercive control, training in psychological abuse, like these are all things that should be mandatory, you know. And I always talk about like DHS, where you could have, you know, an 8-year freaking video gaming degree, you know what I mean, and be able to work and not have any training or background in children's psychology, you know. And so it's like, how can you trust that these mandated reporters know the signs of what to look for in children? How?
Well, who's the other person that spends just as much time or the most time with your child and you is their teachers?
Absolutely.
You don't have to have a teaching degree anymore.
Absolutely.
You don't have to be finished with college anymore.
Right.
So at least 50% of the teachers that are still teaching are alternatively certified, which that doesn't take away from their ability to be a teacher or anything. Right. But they didn't get all the educational psychology and the child psychology and everything that comes with the degree in education.
Right.
That's where the degree comes from, is the developmental aspects of a child. Right. How they learn, what influences learning, what doesn't, how to deal with what influences trauma, all these different things comes with your degree. Right. But now you don't have to have that to teach anymore.
Thanks for tuning in to the first part of this episode with guest Nicole Ward. Be sure to follow, like, share, comment if this episode has resonated with you in any way. We're so glad you're here. Make sure to stay tuned in for next week's episode of part 2, where we dive deeper into Nicole's 17 years of experience being a special needs education teacher, IEPs, and what it means to be your child's biggest advocate. If you or someone you know has been a victim of domestic violence, please call the hotline at 1-800-799-7233. That's 1-800-799-SAFE.